Thank you and welcome everybody. Great to see already over 160 people connected. This is Patrizia Cocca and I'm speaking to you from Brussels. I am the Communication and Knowledge Management Lead for the Global Evaluation Initiative. Welcome to the webinar that today we have organized together with CLEAR Francophone Africa. It's great to see you, and this webinars is one of the many that we have implemented over the past few months together with the CLEAR FA in order to share knowledge and bring awareness to the evaluation field. So since we started already a little late, without further ado, I would like to pass the microphone to the moderator of the sessions, Dr. Edoé. He will be moderating this very interesting panel and very relevant to the geopolitical situation that is at the moment kind of making all of us wonder how to proceed and how to move in these uncertain times. So Edoé, please, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Patrizia, fellow evaluators, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests. It is a privilege for me to moderate this 13th GEI webinar. This is an opportunity for our community to reflect on how we can act so that evaluation can contribute more to the autonomy and ownership of our continent, the African continent, throughout its development trajectory. In a very uncertain world, where the rules of international cooperation are being changed, sometimes unilaterally, by the most powerful one. Over the past decades, Africa has made significant progress in the field of evaluation. Let me outline some element of this progress. As you all know, the African continent has today a growing number of evaluation experts who has been trained by various programs, including international programs such as IPTET, SHIPDET, the SERAF, but also a growing number of academic university programs. And these provide the continent with a critical mass of evaluators, including in various fields, impact evaluation, but also in various sectors. Evaluation across the continent is now enshrined in constitutions. And we have seen also the emergence and a very dynamic network of national evaluation association across the continent. Almost every country on the continent today has at least one VOPI. And more recently, we have seen the emergence of national evaluation systems where our governments are taking initiative to set up national evaluation policies, but also to promote the use of evaluation in decision-making. And we have seen innovation in the field of evaluation. The Made African evaluation agenda is an example of this innovation. Rapid evaluation and other methodology of evaluation has been developed. And we have also seen the development of networks and community of practice across the continent. However, while we celebrate this progress, we have also to recognize the dependency of the continent vis-à-vis the international cooperation in the field of evaluation. Next slide, please. So the evaluation capacity on the continent today still depends heavily on the international cooperation. Next. When this is the example of Benin, where we have seen over the past 10 years the implementation of national evaluation policy, but the actual budgets, national budgets allocated to evaluation has not grown significantly over these decades. So this dependency of our countries vis-à-vis the international cooperation in the field of evaluation is a reality. And this leads us to a conclusion. Next slide. The conclusion is the changes in the field of international cooperation today could significantly impact evaluation capacity development for better or for the worse. Essay in Africa tells us that it is in a very difficult moment that we can also bring innovation and progress. So today we could experience two scenarios. One scenario is we create conditions for local contribution to substitute gaps in international cooperation support, or we can have the worst scenarios where the changes in the international cooperation undermines progress in the field of evaluation and the evaluation capacity development. That means that this is the time for bold action. This is the time to be intentional about transforming evaluation to make it a tool for the autonomy and the ownership of the continent. And next slide. To do that, we need to take stock of the existing innovation and progress that we have made and to reflect on the future. And that will be the discussion that we will have today with the distinguished panelists. So the first panelist, Mr. Thomas Melonio, will define what the current international cooperation looks like. The second one will help us reflect on the challenges in building autonomy in the field of project policy.
It seems that Edoé has frozen, so I will take the floor and I'll continue. So the second speaker will cover the topic of the challenges in building autonomy in the field of policy project management. Lynda Rey will talk about what are the available tools and approach to promote autonomy in the field of evaluation. And finally, Ngoné Ndoye will talk about how we can mobilize local actors and capacity for ownership and autonomy in the field of public policy and evaluation. Next slide. So I'd like to introduce you, Thomas Melonio, and leave the floor to him. Thank you, Thomas.
Merci beaucoup, Patrizia.
Thank you so much, Patrizia. Thank you for including me in this event. Perhaps a few words. As I thought about this seminar, I wondered what points could bring the various people who are interested in development together, whether in Europe or in Africa. I am the head economist of the Agence française de développement. There's one aspect that I'd like to focus on. It's the expectations of our populations in terms of public policy and some unsatisfied expectations as regards these policies. I think the need for efficiency of public policy can be found everywhere in the world, but particularly now in Europe and in Africa, this is our common challenge. Now, I'd like to focus on international policies and solidarity, in the area of solidarity particularly. We can see this now in the United States, but also in Europe and probably in other regions of the world. There's pressure, the desire to turn inward, take care of national issues, And this is a problem for all those actors who depend on international aid. And it can be seen that development financing is decreasing, whether it's quickly at an average speed or slowly, but you can see that through the studies of the OECD, that this public aid is going down. So today we're looking at the impact of these resources. Public resources are rare and society's expectations are high. Next slide.
Next slide, please. Ou diapositive suivante.
Perhaps the other aspect that I wanted to present to you is that I don't think that this fight, I don't think that we've lost this fight. Those of us who are here today, I would like to say I don't think we've lost it because of these various aspects. Recently, within our agency, we reviewed our evaluation policies to introduce certain new aspects. We would like evaluations to be done jointly between our departments, but also the authorities of the developing countries that we bring financing to. Perhaps we're focusing today on the African continent. But this would apply everywhere. I would look perhaps to the Senegalese authorities, where we would like to carry out joint evaluations that would be of interest to both our agency and the Senegalese population. I think if we look at these results together, we can come to an agreement on common accountability. And accountability and choosing subjects that are of mutual interest, I think would make sense. There are different types of evaluation that can contribute to this debate on public policy, whether it's Europe or in Africa. So I think that based on learning, we can come up with policies that are positive. So we want to be able to draw strategic lessons from these evaluations. If we look at education or transportation, there will be conclusions that are specific to the context that we're considering. But on the other hand, if you look at comparable homogeneous groups of policies, you can really draw lessons that are more helpful than those that come from a single project. Lastly, we can look at a project, a public policy in terms of its efficiency, but also it'd be interesting to look at these policies scientifically, come up with counterfactuals, and wonder what would have been the situation if an intervention had not occurred. We can also look at what has been achieved, but there's also this intellectual exercise of a counterfactual that is important too, and also this introduction of a scientific approach would enable us to be more useful in our actions. Next slide, please. There are also some aspects that have to do with evaluation capacities. Developing these capacities is of great interest at Europe, and it's a key element. So we need to invest in statistics capabilities, innovation, in evaluation, using innovative data. And this can really refresh and renew this debate on public policy. This would be investing in human resources. I'm happy to have a partnership with CESA and the M.Sc in Abidjan. We need to have human resources that are able to carry out evaluations and use this data. And secondly, this evaluation would be of benefit to public institutions that need this qualified personnel and the ability to evaluate and draw useful data from these evaluations. What you do in evaluation, it's important to be clear about your objectives. It's one of the faults of developing public policy in Europe. If a project that is social in nature can be evaluated in terms of its strategy and economic interest, there has to be You have to be able to define clear objectives to be able to do an effective evaluation. This is true today, even more than yesterday. It's important to say this because development policy in Europe can have various objectives that are geopolitical, that are technological, and if we don't clearly identify what the final objectives of an intervention were, we won't be able to evaluate it correctly. And I think it's important to come out of this fog of hypocrisy. If sometimes there are hidden objectives, it would be good to be explicit about them, because this is an important aspect of evaluating public policies, especially internationally. Thank you once again to the organizers, and I'm very happy to be here and answer any questions if they arise later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And Thomas is the Chief Economist and Executive Director of the Innovation Strategy and Research at the Agence française of développement. Thank you very much, Thomas. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So for the moment, I'd like to pass the microphone to Lavagnon. He is a full professor and director of programs in management and health systems at the Telfer School of Management of Ottawa. He is also the founding director of the Major Projects Observatory at the Telfer School of Management, always in Ottawa. So, Ika, I'd like to pass the microphone to you. Thank you very much. And please, I would like to remind all the speakers to speak slowly so that the interpreters can do their job better. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Patricia, pour cette belle introduction. Merci aux organisateurs pour cette invitation et merci à l'auditoire. Je vais faire la présentation, le reste de la présentation, je vais la faire en anglais, mais sentez-vous bien à l'aise de me poser les questions en anglais comme en français. Suite à la discussion tout à l'heure ou à la présentation de M. Melonio, I would like to focus here on the rise of geopolitical uncertainty in projects and what it means when it comes to evaluation. I think that will be interesting here. So Africa is no stranger to geopolitics, as you know, and I would like to suggest that, Africa has a problem, is the rise of geopolitical uncertainty in projects. We saw that firsthand when US aid was gutted, sending shock waves to many African countries, and of course, leading senior executives and project leaders scrambling as they were looking for ways to handle these disruptions in cuts in funding, cuts for funding. So this is an issue, and I'm going to suggest that many of the Chinese Belt and Road project funding will be subject to the same geopolitical pressure in years to come. We also saw these geopolitical pressures at play during COVID-19 when Africa did not get its fair share of vaccines. So basically, geopolitical uncertainty is here to stay, and I would like to define it as the propensity of projects to run into trouble because these projects confront significant policy changes taken by powerful nations, nation states, I should say, in search for policy gains, foreign policy gains, vis-a-vis rival states. But this geopolitical pressure will be even more important for grand challenge projects, what I call grand challenge projects. These are projects that seek to tackle some of the world's most pressing issues, such as global poverty reduction, unsustainable development, climate change, and global pandemics, for instance. So I would like us to reflect on how to evaluate the success of these projects and, most importantly, their impact. Because in my view, grand challenge projects do not succeed, they make impact. It's not about, their efficiency or, the extent to which we can deliver them on time or within cost. It's not about mere effectiveness. It's more about the long-term and adaptive sustainability of the benefits out of these projects. So the question that I would like to tackle here is, the business as usual kind of evaluation, OECD evaluation criteria fit for purpose? So basically, you know, I've the long interest in a long-standing interest in global poverty reduction projects and World Bank funded projects in particular. And with newer and more topical subjects, I asked myself, how can project management help deal with global pandemics such as COVID-19? How can we use projects and programs to deliver these kind of global goods? And since then, I have started questioning myself on the role that project management can play when it comes to tackling grand challenges such as sustainable development or climate change, for instance. Now, what is clear is that these grand challenge projects tend to be way more complex and way more uncertain to manage. Why? I would like to suggest that we have two key characteristics that make them more difficult to manage. The first one is that they tend to have elusive goals. They tend to have elusive goals in the sense that these goals evolve over time, or, you know, they are intangible and they evolve over time. And the other thing is that they have numerous stakeholders in numerous countries out of, you know, in this world. And these stakeholders hold differing, if not conflicting expectations. And that makes, you know, the delivery of these projects, which occur in very complex socio-political settings, difficult to manage. So in a sense, because of this complexity, because of this heightened uncertainty, you know, the linear kind of rationality that we are accustomed to with result-based management, logical models, they fall short. So what we need here is not, you know, authoritative and competitive responses to complexity. What we need is collaborative response to complexity. So the best practices are not going to be, you know, fit for purpose. What we need is best fit practices. So we need evaluation practices that speak to reality of context. So we need evaluation practices and project management practices that speak to the peculiar context in which these grand challenge projects are being deployed. Now, because of the sheer fuzziness of these projects, well, the OECD evaluation criteria will fall short. Like I said, it's not about, you know, making sure that these projects are efficient. It's not about making sure that these projects are effective. It's more about making sure that they deliver impact. So what I mean impact, if you consider, for instance, a global health project, it's all about, you know, the number of lives that have been saved by, you know, the intervention. So these OECD criteria that tend to be linear in their working assumption will fall short in the face of such complexity. We know what project success should look like, you know, not only in terms of, you know, business case success or, you know, value creation, and I would suggest value distribution to many stakeholders, including beneficiaries, the poor and marginalized people. But my key suggestion here is that there is a need for evaluation criteria, newer evaluation criteria that will be fit for purpose when it comes to these global goods delivery projects or grand challenge projects. Because of lack of time, I would have focused on a couple of these criteria. So we need transformation criteria because these are transformational initiatives. And therefore, we need to be thinking in terms of the extent to which the project employs adaptive view of sustainability. That's one. The extent to which the project uses systems thinking principles and complexity concept. That's the second one. And the extent to which the project fosters system level equity, diversity, and inclusion. Why? Because, you know, it's all about how the project can learn, how the project can experiment, and how the project can adapt. And it's also about how the project can cause many stakeholders to learn, experiment, and adapt. So we need to find these sort of newer criteria. So that's what speaks to success criteria. We also need to work when it comes to changing our mindset as to success factors. So the question should not be anymore what makes these Grand Challenge projects successful. The question that we need to ask, because context is quite important here, is under what circumstances they work. So when I mean circumstances, I'm talking about the power of context. So you know, what are the context circumstances? What are the institutional circumstances? And what are the project-specific circumstances? So these are the things that we need to be investing in if we want the evaluation of these projects to be helpful and useful for the bottom line of population. I'm talking about value creation and distribution for stakeholders. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Ika. Thank you very much. Edoé, can you hear?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry for all the technical glitch. I'm on the field. I'm very sorry about that. Thank you very much, Professor Ika, for this presentation. So, which also provided some key lessons learned from the project management fields. And the next panelist will be Professor Lynda Rey, who will then reflect on how evaluation can be improved to actually help promote this autonomy. Please, next slide. Professor Lynda Rey is work at the École nationale de politique de École nationale d'administration publique du Canada, ENAP. She's a knowledge broker, but also a well-known evaluator with experience in various fields, including health. And she will reflect on the innovation and new approach in the field of evaluation to help promote autonomy and ownership in the field of public policy. Professor Lynda Rey, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Edoé, and thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be here and to discuss about evaluation, and particularly the promises we can have from evaluation in a changing landscape of international cooperation. I will continue my presentation in French, and I will try to speak slowly so that the interpreter can be able to translate. Donc, bonjour à tous.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on who you are. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak here after my colleagues Thomas and Lavagnon. In my presentation, I would like to cover three main questions that were submitted to me so that I could mull over them. The first of them is, which methodologies can we implement to account for the impact of interventions, especially as we look to empower the continent? The second question has to do with the way we train local stakeholders so they can better account for this contextual evaluation reality. And finally, how can policymakers use evaluation? So you can see that these are a lot of questions, and 10 minutes is not a lot of time to handle them, but I'm going to try to be very direct and to supplement what my previous speakers have said. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
It's always good to start with a thought. I stumbled upon this quote from Kwame Nkrumah in 1957. He was a key leader in Ghana, and he said in this speech, "We shall measure our progress by the improvement in the health of the people, by the number of children in school, and by the quality of their education, by the availability of water and electricity in our towns and villages, and by the happiness which our people take in being able to manage their own affairs. The welfare of our people is our chief pride, and it is by this that my government will ask to be judged. You can see that this quote from 1957 still rings current, and the happiness with which our people take in being able to manage their own affairs is particularly striking. And in this quote, you see the balance between citizens' well-beings in a country and the importance of assessing and evaluating our progress. And you also see the government's responsibility and accountability for these elements. Evaluation is therefore a tool which we can use and experiment with in order to account for and listen to the people's aspirations. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
So, which approaches can be implemented? I would like to reassure Thomas, I totally agree with you, sir. A famous evaluator, Michael Patton, in his book on use-based evaluation, identified nearly 132 evaluation approaches, and that was just in 2008. I think that if you had to make a list of every existing approach, we would never end. But that's good. This means that we have a solid evaluation toolkit, and I would like to underscore the fact that everything is about the goal of the evaluation. It's not about methods or approaches. These should not be the leader or guide evaluations. It's always about the evaluation questions and the goal of the interventions that we are evaluating. But if you're looking at resilience and empowerment, I would say that we need contextualized, culturally appropriate, equitable, inclusive, and decolonized, I use that word, evaluation interventions. I think this term is very current and it's a source of a lot of debate. And debate is great in science. These approaches, they don't necessarily have to be the fashionable ones, but they have to provide scientifically valid conclusions and also actionable conclusions. So that would be my answer. If you look at Africa's context, this has been mentioned, one of the innovations was Made in Africa. I didn't find a French translation for Made in Africa, but you could say porté or carried by the African continent, which means that the context, beliefs, culture, history are shaping these evaluations, particularly in a diverse and often complex African context. This type of evaluation and perspective takes us back to the need for a paradigm shift. Our approach to evaluation needs to account for the reality in the field and in the context. We've heard this several times. We have several approaches to try to address this, or at least position themselves as such in the evaluation process. First of all, there is the culturally sensitive evaluation. This evaluation accounts for culture and beliefs based on the idea that culture and context do have an influence on the outcome of evaluations. So it's not a freestanding approach, but this approach can be more like cross-cutting across methodologies used by the evaluators. And we have evolving evaluation. It supports project development. And I'm sure that Lavagnon will agree with me. He talked about adaptation, and this evaluation approach doesn't necessarily look at relevance or impact, but it progressively supports the development of an action by involving sustainability, which should not be a standalone indicator and instead should be mainstreamed into intervention planning. This was also mentioned, realistic evaluations. What works for whom and under which circumstances? So we look at the impacts of a program based on the specific context. One specific example, you can have a vaccination or a healthcare program with the same characteristics or the same investment areas, but depending on the context, that this will be implemented and the results could vary significantly. So these approaches are very important. You also have democratic deliberative evaluation or value-based evaluation, which underscores the importance of a diversity of perspectives from communities and stakeholders, and involving stakeholders is very important in that respect. What's difficult with these evaluations sometimes is to reach a consensus, and it's not always easy to highlight the various perspectives that exist there, but I believe it's more of an art, really, to try to equitably value the various perspectives instead of just focusing on the technical aspect. Two final ones. We have Donna Mertens's transformative evaluation, which is part of the value system. You know, the method tree, the social justice and values branch in the evaluation tree. And this is a critical approach of social sciences whose goal is to highlight social transformation objectives. And then we have indigenous evaluation, which has really soared over the past few years, especially in Canada and countries such as Australia as well. This has a lot of perks for the African continent, especially since this type of evaluation accounts for local cultural schemas or relational concepts, perhaps spiritual concepts, maybe even proverbs in the various so-called indigenous communities, which are often marginalized. And so evaluation is giving them a voice. This is, in turn, a way to give a voice to people who don't have one. And one of the ways to do that is indigenous evaluation. Next slide, please. So you're going to ask me, what do all these approaches have in common? And I took this very famous quote, "Nothing about us without us." This was developed under the aegis of human rights-based approaches. Anything that targets a specific population or community has to be able to involve and account for this community as part of the development process. So the takeaway here is that various types of evaluation can either hide or highlight different topics such as culture, empowerment, social justice. And here it says, depending on how evaluators plan and implement those evaluations. So from the beginning to the end of the cycle, if you want to tackle these questions related to empowerment, you have to be able to account for empowerment and planning all the way to the point when the results are disseminated. And so on the right, you see that you need to find a balance between values, which some could say are subjective, and evaluation thinking, which is more scientific. And we really need to strike the right balance here if we want these approaches to account for the current reality. Next slide.
Second question, how to train local actors to be able to take into account this expression and realization of empowerment? The answer, I think, is that you have to allow things to happen while going along with it. So most international development aid depends on agencies that have resources and distribute them to countries based on objectives and projects. There's always a learning aspect to these projects, but who defines these learnings? Who defines how this learning occurs, the modalities? So I'd like to go outside the box here. First of all, we talk about promoting a culture evaluation at all levels. Too often, we tend to focus at the central level, at ministries, policy makers, but the first beneficiaries of these trainings are decentralized. So we not only have to advocate for their inclusion, but we also have to effectively use the results. In terms of technical capabilities, we need to consider that evaluation is cross-cutting. It's a professional practice with standards, ethics. But when we train local actors, we have to rethink about training modalities. Trainings in rooms with PowerPoints that are not practical have little chance of ending up being efficient and efficacious. We need to go towards mixed and innovative methodologies. The previous speakers mentioned this. Innovative approaches include digitization, but there's also the digital divide in many of our countries. So we need to be able to innovate. What are the methodologies and training modalities that would be appropriate? Perhaps have methodologies on the ground, such as is done with access to potable water when the entire village goes through the various points where there are water access points. This makes it possible to have community reflection about this. This is one approach compared to digital approaches where you have videos on telephone. So we really need to do a critical analysis based on technical capabilities as regards decolonizing practices, which is an important aspect. If we take a decolonized approach, the training also needs to take that into account. I will perhaps say that it's not always easy, but we need to question standardized evaluation frameworks. That's not always easy, but if we are willing to do so, we will get there. So question these frameworks, logical frameworks or models. I am for those, but if we want to decolonize practices, we really need to question things. And we need to wonder whether this is the most appropriate and best adaptive approach in a situation, or for the target population we're working with. We need to look at methodological sovereignty. Often we have access to data in the north that can't even be mobilized in the south because we don't have databases. Reviews are published in the north. So we really need to look at methodological sovereignty and the idea of forming regional partnerships or partnerships between or among countries so as these data can become accessible. And this brings me to saying that we need participatory and inclusive systems in terms of valuing local knowledge and creating new tools. And as has been said since the beginning, we need to encourage local institutional and logistical support. We depend too much on outside resources. We need to really look at what are the local resources that can be mobilized, such as local support networks, such as national evaluation associations. They do extraordinary work. We need to look at them and work towards them. We often talk about peer learning that can really be inspired by these local resources. I would like to mention the Francophone Forum on Evaluation, which is going to be focused to some extent on this aspect. These methodological approach, and this will be on June 10th to 12th. I hope to see you there. This
Lynda,
is very relevant to what's happening on the continent.
Lynda, you have 2 minutes to wrap up. Thank you.
Perfect. So next slide, I'm on at the end. Perfect.
So the third question is, how can assessment results be used to guide policy decisions? And there are 3 aspects to be taken into account. Decision makers need to know evaluation results. That is the knowledge aspect. We need to bring them to know how the use of these evaluation can be reflected in their work. And they need to work on the tools for spreading this information. Decision makers must be willing to use evaluation results. They need to focus on adaptation, the political time involved, the time required for evaluation to be able to have really actionable results. Finally, they need to be able to use evaluation results, and that's really to do with advocating for evaluations as a political or policy objective. We really need to be able to question the dynamics of power and really encourage collaboration. So it's very difficult for Southern participants to participate in activities in the North as opposed to the opposite. Last slide. Next slide. I would conclude with this quote by Nelson Mandela on the spirit of Ubuntu, that profound African sense that we are human, only to the end about the human beings. Every approach has a meaning, and now it's a matter of really contextualizing these approaches and adapting them to the realities of the continent in terms of empowerment. So it's this deep African sentiment through which we are only human through the humanity of other beings. It's not a parochial phenomenon, but has added globally to our common search for a better word, to really rethink our humanity in a common way. Again, to have a better word, if things are not going well somewhere, it will of course have an effect on the entire planet. Thank you so much, and I look forward to pursuing this discussion.
Thank you very much, Lynda. Very nice words to end your presentation, and I'd like now to pass the floor to Ngoné Ndoye. She's been the former minister of the Senegalese diaspora, also former senator of the Republic of Senegal and mayor of Rufisque. And she is the founding president of FEMIDEC, Femmes et Enfants en Migration et Développement Communautaire. Ngoné, it's a pleasure to have you here. I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, chers tous.
Thank you.
Merci de me permettre.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this very important forum, especially as a local elected representative and someone who works with the grassroots and who feels that they can really express the views and feelings of that community. I have been asked to answer two main questions. What are the effects of the changes in international cooperation on public policy, and what are the levers that are available to mobilize local actors for evaluating public policies with this reduction of international development aid? I would like to say that international cooperation has started to reduce its financing for African countries, but is exactly at the time where African populations, who are mostly young, the average age being 19.4, where they themselves have chosen sovereignty and autonomy. I think it's a key moment where it'll be quite easy to reconcile the two situations. The approach of the international community and that which we have founded in Africa, where we're looking for autonomy and sovereignty. And the most obvious example of this is that all of the last elections, especially in West Africa, have brought to positions of power very young leaders, but even the countries that have not had elections are being led by very young leaders. I think it should be quite easy, in quotes, but at least possible to see a promising and revolutionary dynamic when we analyze these changes internationally in the area of evaluation. This will really have a direct effect on how African countries implement and form their policies. We need to adjust the adjustment rather of the donors' priorities might lead to increased private investments, a more strategic approach. I would look to the example of the DR. If today it has been agreed, as Mr. Melonio said, to rethink these evaluations, I think there's also internal evaluations that need to occur for the populations that take into account the cost and impact relation among the populations. Populations today want to know whether the costs of all these programs are reflected not only on the populations in terms of what is brought to them in the way of solutions, but are these things balanced and adapted to the situations in which they live? To be able to carry out these evaluations, we need to identify the levers to strengthen these international evaluation systems, empowering our national evaluation institutions. We need to have independent, well-financed institutions. I think evaluation is a tool that is very important for our societies. We need to create structures, agencies within governments, and even strengthen those that exist already, but also create new organizations, even at the decentralized level. In Senegal, we have 2 evaluation committees, one within the National Assembly, another in the Court of Accounts. This makes it possible for Senegal, especially in the National Assembly, to really carry out evaluations before making decisions, before legislating, to really understand what the impacts are of these evaluations on populations, but also on political programs, so as not to depend exclusively on development partners. So these are our own evaluations. Strengthening human and technical capabilities, it's important to train a new generation of local and independent evaluators. This means we need to expand training programs in this area in African universities and improve certification mechanisms and professional certifications in the area of evaluation. It's very important. Also, we need to incorporate non-state actors in evaluation processes. Young people, women, civil society actors, and private sector actors must all be associated to this design and implementation analysis of evaluations. I think that this young African population is interested in the development policies that are presented to them. So involving them in this work will become essential. As women, those of us who work at the grassroots, who work with these populations, we are the same people who do what's needed for women to be able to, for children to be able to eat, for the house to be clean, so that families can have access to basic social services. These women have a contribution to make. They are responsible for all aspects of a family's survival, whether it's making do with their circumstances and poverty. These women need to be involved in these evaluations.
Thanks to this participatory approach, we make sure that these evaluations really account for the needs of the various communities. Now, let's talk about adapting evaluations to the African context, which have to be overhauled to meet the continent's needs. It's about cultural diversity and local economic realities, to each their own specificities. By adopting a participatory methodology and incorporating new promising voices, we can make evaluations relevant. Each community has its own reality. We have to innovate to ensure national ownership of the evaluation process. But how do we innovate? We innovate thanks to digital technology for evaluation. For instance, we have online data collection platforms, mobile apps for outcome management, to facilitate access to reliable, up-to-date data. This makes the process more transparent and better involves local populations in the evaluation process. The transformative women that we are and fisher women that we are, also fish processors, we have all adapted to e-learning. We sell on the web, we trade on the web, we contribute to the development of our business, and we are connected in between ourselves. So I think that we have the right tools to be able to contribute to the evaluations. And we also have to create an African network to share resources. We need to mobilize South-South initiatives to share our knowledge, our tools, and our methodologies that are adapted to our realities. In Senegal, we will have people from all over Africa to talk about a new deal for the continent and how we produce. This will be taking place in Senegal starting in May 17th. And in Mali, we will talk about raw materials. This means that the peoples want to act on the issues that matter to them. They want to understand why there's so much irregular migration of young Africans, why women are not economically able to carry their own projects yet, why women are not able to live from their strategy and their ability to process products, and also their ability to produce agricultural and fishing goods. All of these communities have to be involved in the evaluation in a South-South cooperation dynamic. This will help enhance cooperation within Africa and rise beyond traditional cooperation models, which were often invented by external donors. Of course, donors are more so private. They're more in an economic relationship with populations from the global South. I wouldn't say that their interest is in hiding reality, but at least they won't contribute to an evaluation that will free us from this partnership, so to speak. So we have to encourage community-based evaluation so that projects, once again, take into account the specific needs of local populations, because development is first and foremost local before it is national or sub-regional. Development is carried forth by communities, and so we really need to reach those communities. We have to understand their practices and hear from them so that we can really assess their lived experience of what we are presenting. That is, instead of wondering every time what is happening, depriving ourselves, being in debt. No, the people want to know how their economic prospects are going to change and how they're going to benefit from this. And this will make projects more sustainable. And of course, we have to promote a culture of evaluation and assessment. Evaluation is important. It shouldn't be seen as a constraint. On the other hand, it is a lever for development. We have to involve governments, private actors, and civil society and raise their awareness of evaluation in the project cycle. Through communication and training campaigns, we will make sure that this is sustainable and it's essential. People will take more seriously an activity or a program or a project when they know that their community and their society's future depends on this project. But for that, we need to spark people's interest in evaluating this. In closing, evaluation has a strategic role to play in empowering Africa in the light of this reshaping of international cooperation. It is a prime tool for the sovereignty of our peoples and our governments. As a governance tool, it helps Africans better manage their resources, strengthen their public management systems, and ensure that public policies truly meet the needs of their people. It is urgent that we promote independent, participatory, and adaptive evaluation in light of local context while mobilizing technology and partnerships within Africa to build local capacity. Africa will only be able to take a strong stand on the international stage by taking on a role as a key stakeholder in designing and evaluating public policies. In this respect, evaluation is a key tool to assess progress, to adjust strategies, and to ensure inclusive and sustainable development. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I am here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame la Ministre. I'd like to now open the floor to questions from the participants. If you are interested in asking a question directly, please raise your hand. We can unmute you and you can ask your questions. And if you do so, be concise and brief in your question. Otherwise, we have a few questions that were left in the Q&A chat. So I'll give you a few seconds to see if there is anybody that would like to pose a question directly. Two participants raised hands. Megan, can you unmute them?
Alors,
yes,
vous
yes,
m'entendez
yes,
bien?
sir. Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Ok, alors, je vais parler en français.
I would like to speak in French. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank all of the panelists in this meeting. We have learned a lot from the various presentations. My name is Yasser Bouana. I'm in charge of monitoring and evaluation at an NGO in Senegal. I have one question related to the first presentation on the evaluation for the TER, the Express Regional Train in Senegal. For evaluations like this, are there specific methods? I'm asking this because in our organization, we sometimes use experimental methods to evaluate our projects, especially some specific models. And so I wanted to know if there are specific models to evaluate programs such as our TER or Express Regional Train. Thank you.
So, has anybody would like to respond to this question? Any of our panelists?
Patrizia, je peux répondre.
Yes, Patrizia, I would like to address some of the points. There was also a question from Ngoné Ndoye on this same evaluation, whose concept is really interesting. This will be an evaluation conducted between donors and the government to treat questions that are of interest to funders, governments, and the citizens. And what's interesting in this collective evaluation is that it will address fairly different questions. At AFD, we also have to account for the public monies that we use for our citizens. I'm sure that the Senegalese government is wondering about this as well, but they have different citizens, and they can also ask their own questions based on the analyses and data that is produced. And we have to be clear, and I think Lavagnon and other panelists said this, we always have to identify the questions that we're trying to answer, and they're not necessarily the same based on your position. And we can see how, for a same project, the questions can be different. What I think is interesting is pooling our data collection so that we can produce and limit costs and produce joint knowledge. This is not going to spark necessarily a consensus. I think Lynda was saying does democratic evaluation result in a consensus? Well, I'll tell you, not necessarily, because a project or a policy can satisfy some people and not others. But, you know, this is life in democracy, and the role of evaluation is to highlight some outcomes that are not necessarily consensual, because, for instance, 80% of people could be happy and others are not. And so then a government can decide whether this is, you know, in everybody's best interest, whether the losers of an evaluation can be compensated. And so, yeah, results don't necessarily spark a consensus on whether these outcomes and findings are good for everyone. And then, Mr. Yasser, please send me a private message if you'd like. I think the idea is to blend qualitative data collected from the people with quantitative data from users of the infrastructure and citywide analyses to see who is directly and indirectly benefiting from this. So you can see that objectives and methodologies are being blended depending on the evaluation questions. I won't be much longer, but if there are specific questions on this, perhaps I could liaise directly with the people involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'd like to allow Buba to talk. Buba, I'm going to unmute you and see.
Hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I would like to ask my question in French. Okay, bonjour à tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. My question is specifically to Ms. Rey, and it's more so related to decolonizing evaluation processes. During her presentation, Professor Rey mentioned the idea that we should give up standardized evaluations. And so I want to ask Professor Rey whether she could give us a specific example, a tangible example, so that we could understand how to decolonize an evaluation. Thank you.
Merci Bouba pour la question.
Thank you, Buba, for the question. Just to specify, I am not focused on decolonizing evaluations. I'm a professional in this area, and I am aware that there are several approaches in our toolbox. But if we wanted to look at the idea of autonomy or empowerment, we must note that when we come to a project or working on the ground to do an evaluation, we have pre-established approaches. I talked about logical frameworks and others, and one idea for questioning these approaches is to really look towards visual methods or drawing or design approaches. I think organizations like UNICEF has taken this approach when they want to include children in these evaluations, using other tools that are just not the traditional tools, the decolonizing aspect. I gave another example. If we want to identify issues or we want to evaluate the relevance of an intervention, this was also used in the context of access to safe drinking water. The phrase that is often used is community walk. So members of the community accompany the evaluator, or the evaluator accompanies members of the community who go from water point to water point to identify the various aspects or things that are at stake. It's true that if I compare community work to a review of literature on the issues linked to water, there are two different approaches, but one is better adapted to community interventions and is not in contradiction with a review of literature on the issues related to water. So it's always a matter of, rather than rather than just importing outside approaches, that perhaps we can integrate other approaches that can give us more context, more cultural sensitivity in what we do when we implement evaluations. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you. Yes, it was very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before passing the floor, the microphone to somebody else, there is a question in the Q&A for Professor Ika. Carlisle Levine says, I very much appreciated your presentation. It made me think about what knowledge and what ways of knowing are valued as producing relevant, credible, and useful findings. Could you please comment on this? Professor Ika, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patricia, and thanks for the question. So that's a great one. So the issue of, ways of knowing is quite important here, especially when I hear Lynda talking about decolonization and, decolonizing evaluation practices. So this question of ways of knowing it becomes quite important. So the issue when it comes to evaluation made in Africa is that we want to think out of the box, as Lynda was and Thomas were suggesting. But to think out of the box, we need to propose new tools, new ways of doing evaluation, new ways of practicing evaluation, and new ways of preparing our evaluation reports, which means that we can't use the same old tools and expect ourselves to think out of the box. So that's the first thing I would like to say. So therefore, we need to reframe evaluation. We need to rethink evaluation. And in so doing, we need to inject new ways of thinking, including philosophies that are mostly from Africa and ways of thinking that are mostly from Africa. And we need to integrate, African cultures in the way we design these evaluation tools. And this is easier said than done because, the direction of the overall goal is quite clear, but the means to the end will be a little bit, it will take long to get there. So it's not just good enough to have evaluation made in Africa where, to say that evaluation is made in Africa where we are borrowing tools. Okay, so that does not work in my view. So we need to rethink first evaluation, but you can't rethink evaluation without rethinking project management. How can you evaluate projects if you don't understand the job of the project manager? So these two disciplines need to talk to each other, and these two different practitioners need also to talk to each other. So we need to learn from each other. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So these are the comments that I can make based on that question.
Thank
I have
you.
more to say, but I'm going to stop here for the moment.
Thank you very much, Ika. And we have another question from Damilola Decker. How does the Senegalese government plan to step into the gap created by the reduction of funds given by the donors? And what advice do you have for other governments in the continent and global south on this? So maybe Ngoné, would you be able to address this question? Thank you.
I cannot represent Senegal. I am not from the government of Senegal, just to start with that. Thank you. I think that this is a common issue in many or all African countries because we know that these funds will be withdrawn. But I think that sovereignty begins with work at the grassroots level, the personal work done by each individual, that each person take or be accountable. Young Africans are really claiming this sovereignty because they think that their resources are dilapidated, whether we're talking about ocean resources, mining resources, any resource really, all types of resources that exist in African countries. The young populations believe. Lynda talked about decolonization. People really think that these resources need to be in our hands. So we need to involve ourselves or to become involved in this work in capitalizing on our resources, really supporting public policies for access to these resources. And this cannot be done without engaging the community, without making the community understand its role. That's why it's important, in my opinion, to know that it's time that we be able to evaluate ourselves, what we do. Evaluation is a valid tool for us to use. Isn't it time for that to happen? Shouldn't we prioritize the feelings of African populations, what they want to do for their future? If we all do that, I think we can get 50% of our answers. And Senegal, as a nation, believes that it can really work with its populations to arrive at food independence, really move forward on the TER project. Africa has as much in the way of capacities, strengths. It has the young population. We have enough arable land, enough water. These are gifts from God, and we just need to reset the playing field, and each person will play their role in this process.
Thank you very much.
May I add something? I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
What the minister just emphasized is very important. I would like to add the matter of capacity building that Lynda was describing earlier. It's a useful and very important aspect to reach the goals that the minister just described. We need to be able to invest in capacity building itself in the area of evaluation, an evaluation that is done by Africans, for Africans, with Africans, and it's possible. The resources are not always there when we collaborate internationally, so we need to contextualize this work such that evaluation is contextualized. We will not be able to develop evaluation capabilities without working on these capabilities and skills.
Patrizia, maybe I can add one sentence on this.
Please.
Je pense que to complement all this, dans la dernière slide.
In the last slide, I talked about being a knowledge, and I think we have great intentions on the continent, but sometimes there's a lack of concrete will, and I think we need to be able to very clearly consider the fact that if we really want change, we also really need to free up resources and really rethink where these resources go and whether the resources are placed in the right place to reach the objectives or realize our aspirations on the continent. So to come back to capacity building, we think a great deal, and congratulations to CLEAR for the support they provide to many governments in this regard. We develop evaluation laws, but we need budgets to support this and to support capacity building, and these resources can begin at a very low level, but the political will is the most important aspect, and that political will must really be endogenous and sustain the various approaches. If we really want to talk about decolonization or opening up to new contextualized practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have just a few minutes left. Ngoné, please, would you like to
add something?
Oui.
Thank you so much. I think we have provided this solution ourselves. If we need means that are the resources of the African countries, if we want approaches that are adapted to Africa freeing itself, the solution is that Africa needs to control these resources. We need a strong political will, but a political will can be imposed by the populations, by the grassroots level, And today, this grassroots level is sufficiently well prepared and has the tools and is committed, engaged to really find solutions that are contextualized. We are at a key turning point. Africa's demanding this. The international community has grown tired, or so the experts in evaluation that are native to the continent will serve our continent well. I am convinced of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you so much for the really lively chat and so many questions. I really hope that all the questions that we could not answer will become a beautiful blog or a series of blog or maybe different seminars that we can organize later on this year. I don't know if Edoé is going to be able to deliver some final thoughts. Edoé was meant to be the moderator today, but unfortunately, technical problem have impeded him to do so. But I'd like to thank each of every presenter. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today. I think that the conversation and the amount of questions that you received was really because you sparked a lot of thoughtful and interesting ideas. So thank you very much again for being with us. Thank you to all participants. We will share presentations and the recording of the webinar to all the participants, and then they will be made public. And I'd like to just give 30 seconds to each of the presenters if they want to have a final word just to close the event and help me to close the event. Thank you. Maybe Professor Ika, can we start with you?
I would just like to thank you so much, Patrizia. I would just like to say that Africa needs to work on evaluation being done by Africans, for Africans, by Africans. Thank you. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank
Thomas.
you so much. Thomas?
En rebondissant sur ce que vient
I would like to add to what Lavagnon just said. I think it's essential to have sovereignty on the ability to evaluate your own public policies. And when you need the financial and human needs, and then sovereignty comes with the responsibility and assuming the costs that are involved. Then the actors have their own intentions. Sometimes there are cooperative projects, but then there are the African leaders that need to define their own agendas and the resources that are needed for the same. So the first stage is to really have the abilities to really be able to pursue this public policy of evaluation.
Merci beaucoup, Thomas.
Thank
Lynda?
you so much, Thomas. Lynda?
Nothing to add, expect that this is the starting of the conversation, and I'm looking forward to continuing this, maybe in terms of another area or forum for discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And very well. I think everybody has said something, and Edoé is asking me, and I lost your... so we are very happy to have had you here. CLEAR FA and the GEI are committed to strengthen the national evaluation system worldwide. And of course, CLEAR FA is focused on the Francophone countries in the Africa region. We will continue to convene these kind of webinars and to publish knowledge products to help the conversation going. Thank you very much, and au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Au revoir.
Bye.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you.
Merci vraiment.
Thank you very much, and a strong call to the African diaspora to be involved in the continent's destiny. Thank you.
Voilà. Merci, au revoir.
Merci à toutes et à tous. C'était un plaisir.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Megan, Patrizia, for
Thank you.
setting you up together.
Thank you.
Bonne fin de journée.
Enchanté,
Merci
Thomas.
encore.
Au plaisir.
Merci, Lavagnon.
Bye.